Hey guys, today we're going to look at this. This is a 2017 KLR650. It's one of the few bikes that has not seen many changes over time. And even the engine and the carburetor, it's still available. It's not fuel injection. It's a very simple bike, and it is one of the best bikes that you can get for surviving an apocalypse. The one bike that you probably would get for surviving an apocalypse of some kind, a zombie apocalypse or a COVID apocalypse, is a KLR650. Very few bikes are made this simple. You can practically fix this bike on the side of the road with some bubble gum. It's one of the simplest bikes you can get, and yet one of the best bikes you can get. This thing has a cult-like following, literally a cult-like following. Kawasaki has made this bike for 30-something years, and it's an incredibly good bike. People get these bikes for very cheap. In the used market, they go for like $2,000 to all the way to $3,000, $4,000. Brand new, they're a little bit north of $6,000. Even the new KLR650 that's coming out, it's still at $6,500 to $7,000. So it's much cheaper than all the bikes that you can possibly get in the market. And it still makes a better adventure bike than many other bikes. This bike has been made for about 30 years, and it's really one of the original adventure bikes. The cool thing about this, it's basically just dead simple. It's still carbureted. It's a 2017, but yet carbureted. Only now, recently, Kawasaki decided to bring out the new KLR, the massive 21-inch front wheel. Normally, you would not see this in a lot of the top-end adventure bikes unless you get like a KTM adventure. For this KLR, this is the second version or the third version of the KLR650. It's got improved braking and improved suspension. The original KLR650 had very mushy suspension, and if you were to hit the front brake, the entire front end was just like swoop in, and it wasn't a very good feeling. But the braking on this 2017 is much more improved than the older generation of the KLR650. The KLR650, despite being a heavy adventure bike, makes a very decent dual sport for doing even some single tracks. If you're a very good rider, you can definitely take this on some tight single tracks. I do like the new improved graphics that this new KLR650 has. The old gen KLR650 was much uglier, but that kind of was its redeeming feature, the ugliness of the KLR650. This bike is one of these bikes that it looks much better when it's dirty. When it's clean like this, it's missing out a little bit on the character. You know, this is the type of bike that you would get if you were trying to outrun a zombie apocalypse, you know, kind of like a COVID apocalypse that's happening. This is the bike. It's simple. You can pretty much fix it with anything, available parts. Anybody that can work on carburetors can work on this. It's dead simple. This one uses a bash plate that's made out of plastic. It's not very good, but there's so much off the market for this bike that you can literally just go to any used marketplace or any online store, and you'll see aluminum bash guards and accessories for this thing. This bike has got this massive kickstand, but one thing I don't like about this, so this kickstand kind of swoops outward because it has to clear the swing arm. But if you're sitting on the bike, it's difficult to get your foot to push it down because there's no foot here. Usually there's a little bit of a stalk that comes out on the kickstand that you can use to push down. And also it's got a center stand, and I noticed that the center stand and the kickstand hit each other when they're up. But I'm not sure if it's because of the center stand is a cheap aftermarket, but that's something that kind of bothers me a little bit. As to it, it's really a very large and good kickstand, and it also has a nice foot, so when you put it on gravel or dirt, it doesn't fall through. This one's got a massive, it's a Tusk off-road peg. This is excellent. I kind of would like to have this on my Super Tenere. This is an excellent foot peg, and this is exactly what you want if you're doing any sort of off-roading. Of course, it's got something that you don't see on many modern bikes, definitely not anything you would see on a bike from 2017, and that's this. This is a petcock, and Kawasaki, you know, nowadays with fuel injection bikes, you don't need any of this, and so it's kind of weird that we do have this. I've had carbureted bikes as well that do not have this sort of system, and even my Ninja 250 from 2008 didn't have this kind of like petcock thing. It just had like a slot where you would just leave it for priming, and it's a better system. This is nice if you have to remove the gas tank and stuff and you don't need any sort of tool to close it. So facing this way, that's reserve. This is the fuel is on, so it's kind of flowing down to the carb, and this is shut off. You just have to look for the arrow. I do enjoy the graphics of this bike, and it does cut a very wide profile, but often you'll find that a wide profile works to your advantage if you're out riding on the highway, and this bike makes a really good commuter. Often this bike doesn't get enough credit as a commuter, but it's probably one of the best commuters you can get. So it is nice that you can use the key to open up the tank, and very easy. Remember, I've had Hondas that are pretty modern, and they have the gas cap that you have to like put the key and then remove this section and put it somewhere on the bike. This is a much better system with a hinge. Plastic handguards, they are not attached to this, so basically they just protect you from the brush if you like go through some trees or something. But my Tenere, for example, this is metal and attaches to the handlebar, which is much stronger because it protects your levers. If you notice the lever here, it's bent because it was dropped. So this is something that usually happens if you don't have the aluminum bash guard, hand guard coming here. It's always a good idea to have it. It is pretty striking. It looks good. It's slim. You know, if I pull out the Super Tenere, you'll see right away the difference in mass. On the right side of the engine, you'll see several things that are very familiar to most people. It's very easy to access. When I look at this, if you've ever worked on any engine, every component is very easy to reach. You know, you got your oil filler here, you have your oil filter case here. This is not even like the cartridge style, which I don't like. You have a oil sight glass, which is nice. Honda does, on many new modern bikes, they do not give you an oil sight glass, and these are really nice and convenient. So right here you have your carburetor, and of course this is a single cylinder bike, so it's a thumper. So it's a very simple, it's a large carburetor, and you do have a very easy way to adjust your idle right here. Often you'll have like just a screw, but it is nice that it's a big lever that controls that mechanism. And over here you have your starter. It's very easy to reach. I guess you would have to remove maybe the exhaust to get to, but I do appreciate to keep things nice and simple. And of course you have the engine here. It's a very good, robust engine. It's been known to burn oil at high speeds in the highway. It's equipped with a really nice sounding FMF exhaust. I usually don't buy exhaust for my bikes because, you know, it's kind of like an expense that you don't really need. And I often find that it draws too much attention from police, so I try to keep it nice and quiet. I do need some tires here. I should be ordering them pretty soon. The chain is still good on it. Seat on this is really wide, but it's still a very short bike. If you're thinking about doing any riding with a passenger, if you sit here, there's a very limited amount of space here for a passenger. You know, the V-Strom 650 that I had was much better for a passenger, but the seat on this, when you compare it to other dual sports that are in the same league, this one's much more comfortable. This is a much more street-oriented dual sport. The rear here, you have a helmet lock. I'm actually never sure why they put helmet locks or even bother with helmet locks. I have never used a helmet lock in my life, and I don't intend on putting my helmet on my bike. It just seems kind of ridiculous, but it's there if you need it. You know, surprisingly, this bike is taller than my Yamaha Super Tenere, and it does weigh much less, but it feels taller. The seating position is very different from this and the Super Tenere. The way you sit on this is very neutral, and on the Super Tenere, it feels a little bit sportier with your feet mounted just a little bit further back. So the Super Tenere gives you a little bit of a sporty position compared to this. This definitely feels like you'd be doing a lot better riding off-road because you stand up on it in a very different way. It feels much more natural to sit upright on this than on the Super Tenere. One of the big benefits of this bike is that it's water-cooled. Right in there you have your radiator and coolant. So the competitors to this really are the XR650L and the DR650. There's other bikes like the V-Strom 650, but that's not really a direct competitor. The XR and the DR are both air-cooled, and this one is water-cooled. So it's a little bit heavier, but it does give you this amazing liquid-cooled engine that's a much better bike for most people. At least I find that water-cooled bikes are what I tend to look for. I don't particularly like the air-cooled stuff because it is much simpler to have and there's less problems, but since I commute and I go to the city and I do a lot of like slow speed riding, it is nice to have water cooled in your motorcycles. So when you look at controls, everything is very simple about this bike. That is the beauty of the KLR650. Everything is as it should. You have your turn signals, very simple. Unlike Honda, they don't reverse things. Then you have your horn here, you have your high beam, and over here you have your choke. The choke is what you use to start the bike in the mornings if it's cold, and it just brings the bike back to life. Right here is a nice accessory to have. It's a heated grip, and you just push the button and it rises up in the temperature and decreases. It's hooked up to the fuse. On this right side, you have your heated grip. You have very stock control, so nothing complex. You have your kill switch and your starter, and that's pretty much it. The handlebars are extremely well designed for riding off-road. This is a very good handlebar for doing any sort of like gnarly off-road stuff, and it's a very controlled sort of handlebar. They are very flat here and they kind of swoop back a little bit, but it's a very comfortable at attention sort of riding position. It's not a lazy kind of handlebar, so it does put you in a kind of like a little bit more aggressive off-road position than I'm used to. The style of handlebar is very different than the Super Tenere. The Super Tenere feels wider, like when you're riding through various places in the twisties. It feels like I'm almost like hitting mailboxes and light poles. This one feels a little bit narrower, but for this bike, because it is so much narrower, it feels wider for some reason. When it comes to mirrors, I don't know if these are stock, but I do not like these mirrors at all. I'm not a fan of them. They're too short, and for this type of bike, you want a mirror that is a little bit spaced out so you can see really well behind you. Kawasaki definitely skipped out on the Speedo, which this is much better than the old Speedo, but still not very good. Other than being a good design element, it makes it very simple. You can see directly in front of you, and that's exactly what you want. Now, my major issue with this is that it has no fuel gauge, and I know that might be something that's petty. But imagine, I had several Ninja 250s. The new Ninja 250s designed in 2008 had fuel gauges, and the gauges on the Ninja 250 for 2008 were better designed than this. I wonder why Kawasaki just didn't bring that over to this and just change it. It would make more sense to put a gas gauge on it. I mean, it is 2017. So you'd imagine that you would put a fuel gauge. But then again, fuel gauges for motorcycles are notoriously inaccurate, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. But I still would want to have that. So on this side, you have your tach, and this revs to like 7,000 RPMs, and then it red lines at 8 to 10,000 RPMs. This bike is really comfortable at 5,000 to 6,000 RPMs. In the middle, you have your speedometer, you have your odometer and your trip. And then here you have your engine temperature, which seems very badly designed. For this bike also, it comes with a slightly larger touring windscreen. Seeing a Ninja 250, you kind of know what the front looks like. This is almost exactly like a copy of it, but I think it looks good. I like the new Kawasaki redesigns that they did in 2008. So as you know, I have quite a few adventure bikes. I've had, you know, an Africa Twin, Super Tenere, V-Strom, BMW GS's, and I keep coming back to this. This is my second KLR650. And I've always wondered, like, who would get the KLR650? There's a very different type of character that gets this. Often you'll see this bike with milk crates on the bike, because the type of riders that get this are not so much interested in the looks as they are in the process of riding. And you kind of admire that about riders, that aspect of them. It's not about showmanship, and I find that a lot of new adventure riders, they like to tell people that they ride this particular brand, you know, like Super Tenere, GS, but by most specs, this bike will not do well. It's very low power. It only makes like 30-something horsepower, and it weighs a little bit more than the competition, but the direct competitors to this are really the DR650 and the XR650L. And those bikes are great in their own right, and they're a little bit more oriented towards dirt. This one's definitely more oriented towards the highway and riding on the road, but I find that most people do use this aspect of the bike much more. This one has a much larger gas tank than the other bikes, but this one you cannot really compare to the V-Strom 650 because it is very different. This I would probably take off-road. The V-Strom 650, I'm not really interested in riding off-road, but it is a very good bike for most people. It does everything. It does everything, not well, but it does everything. And there's something that's really nice about this bike. A bike that you can ride through some sort of apocalypse. And it's so simple that, and they made so many of these that you can get parts for them just about everywhere. So it makes a lot of sense to buy this in the used market. Of course, this is one of the last modern KLR650s. The new one will be coming out, I believe, in 2022. So, and I think a lot of people are interested in getting that because of the fuel injection. The big downside of this, of course, and upside for some people, is that it's carbureted. I don't particularly enjoy carbureted bikes too much because you do have to work on them a little bit. I do wonder which bike I would ride cross-country if I was to ride either the KLR or my Super Tenere. And I've wondered about that, but it really matters which bike I would do more off-road riding. If I was to do more off-road riding, this one would be the best one to get. The Super Tenere is more of a highway bike. It will definitely cope with some fire roads, but even on my V-Strom 650, when I got to Utah, it was kind of a bear of a bike to ride off-road. This one, with some nice guards for the engine and the plastic, I wouldn't hesitate to take it on some nice single-track trails, but it is a little bit bigger bike and it's got a lot of plastic, so you have to kind of keep that in mind. But this would be a great bike to take out to the West Coast and ride the deserts and ride the Valley of the Gods in Utah. It makes a lot of sense. The Super Tenere, it's such a massive bike and you do feel that weight on it that I don't think I'd enjoy it riding off-road as much as this one. And a petcock, I mean, that is antiquated. It's really antique when it comes to things, and I think that's the appeal of this bike, that it's antique. Really interested in like speeding too much, but it sounds awesome. And it's a 5-speed manual transmission with a chain. And you know what that means is that basically it's very well spread. One of these bikes that's like the most basic of all. One of the things I don't like about the bike right away is that the shifting is really clunky, and I wonder if there's something wrong with it. But when I shift, there's no, it's like vague. There's no clear indication of which gear you're shifting. You just gotta know where the gears are, but it's kind of like a mushy gearbox. I don't remember my KLR's transmission. And of course, this is a chain-driven bike, which is what you would expect. Let's pull into here and just look over the bike a little bit. You can see there's snow piled up everywhere. Alright, I'm going to put it on the center stand. One thing I noticed is that I have to lube this this kickstand. This kickstand is massive. Alright, and that's ice on the floor there, so this is actually the good bike for going around ice. Look at this. That's the 2017 KLR650. This massive kickstand is kind of cool. It comes out over the swing arm so it doesn't rub the swing arm. And look at these foot pegs. I'm going to turn the bike off. Yeah, let's just look around the... I'm going to put my gloves on, it's freezing out. This is ice. I shouldn't go into the wetness. Yeah, look at this. This is... okay. Very dangerous out today. And look at that rear wheel. That's spoked, so that means that you could go off-road and it's a lot stronger. I'm not really into too much the spokes, just because I don't really do a lot of off-road riding. A little protection here for the rear brake master cylinder reservoir. You got foot pegs for your passenger, but the seat for the back is relatively comfortable for a passenger, but when you compare it to other bikes like the Vehiclehunterz 650, it's much wider, it's a little bit longer, and I believe it's better. You know, I usually like to compare the bike to the Vehiclehunterz because the Vehiclehunterz gives you such a good bang for the buck. This thing is actually more expensive than the Vehiclehunterz I had. It's much newer, but the technology on it is much older. So my Vehiclehunterz was a 2006. This is a 2017, so quite a big difference in age, but yet this one is much less advanced than the Vehiclehunterz. And there are certain things that I do like on the Vehiclehunterz. The fuel injection, I like the comfort, I like the aerodynamic aspect of the Vehiclehunterz. It's a much better highway bike. But this has got the off-road capability, much more off-road capability than the Vehiclehunterz. You know, I kind of think that they should really blend the KLR650 more with the Vehiclehunterz, but they never do. They do have like a Vehiclehunterz Adventure now with spoke wheels, but it's still the same size for the front wheel, and you really can't have that. So look at that front wheel. The front wheel is a clear advantage over the Vehiclehunterz. It's a 21-inch front wheel, and it's really good to have if you're riding off-road in any trail. But the engine on this, look at that shock. It's I think it's an aftermarket shock. This is where the battery goes. Very, very typical to these sort of bikes to have the battery there. You know, on the Tenere they put it on one side, which I don't really like. So this is the engine, of course. You have your sprocket, very easy to access with a really good protector. It's the starter. That's so simple to get, and of course it's one single cylinder, so it's very easy to maintain, and it's a thumper, so it does sound really good. It's liquid cooled, so it's got a fan and shroud here. You can see it's been laid down, but not too bad. You know, it's like they're still using petcocks in 2017. That's incredible. I don't think a lot of people know that you have to switch to reserve when you're riding around. There's your seat lock right there, which I don't know too many people that use them. But this whole style of KLR has been redesigned for 2017. I don't remember when the new KLR was designed. This is the new style. So I'm probably going to do a lot more riding on the KLR650. It's nice that in a time of a heavily saturated adventure market, that you can still get something so simple like this and get something so cheap like this. And I kind of enjoy it. I enjoy the aspect of having a simple bike that's cheap and still affordable. When bikes on the adventure market are costing upwards of $20,000, the KLR650 is kind of like one of these bikes that it's very accessible to everybody within a very wide budget range. And I think that's why I still recommend this over many other bikes out there. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video.